upending one of the closest alliances in the world for many years. The United States and Canada have a thriving tourism industry, smooth supply systems, and strong cultural ties. However, tariffs, vehement language, and consumer backlash are making things more difficult. From failing border tourism to tariffs in full swing to Canada revising its export playbook, Canadian campaigns are booming, travel south is stagnating, and new trade channels are being expedited. The silent retaliation is genuine. Let's examine how these changes are influencing the economic trajectory of North America. 1. Tourism runs out of gas, cracks at the border. Breaks at the border, travel is running low. In the past, cross-border travel represented the easy sailing of U.S.-Canada relations. While Americans gladly pocketed the profits, Canadians crowded buffalo shops, Arizona golf courses, and Florida beaches. However, that flow encountered a snag in 2025. According to Statistics Canada, return car journeys fell 36.9% in July, while air travel fell by over 26% annually. There's a concoction of frustration behind those figures. Trump's frequent insults to Canada, including the shocking idea that it may become the 51st state in the Union, are piled on top of tariffs. Canadians have boycotted U.S. in response using their money's travel, either staying domestically or going abroad. There is a noticeable reversal. More Americans entered Canada by car than Canadians left in the opposite direction for the first time. U.S. air arrivals also slightly increased, indicating that Americans are still traveling north for vacations while Canadians are snarling. The United States border states and popular tourist destinations are suffering. Once booming with Canadian cash, hotels, restaurants, and resorts are facing a halt in their earnings. Once a reliable economic engine, tourism is faltering due to political unrest. However, tourism is only one aspect of the situation. When we examine commerce itself, things get pretty heated. 2. Tariffs in overdrive, no escape routes, and 35% levies. Overdrive tariffs, no escape routes, and 35% levies, if progress is sluggish. In this trade saga, tariffs are the full-blown engine knock. President Trump increased taxes on Canadian imports on August 1st, from 25% to 35%, claiming national security under the EPA. Ottawa rejected this argument as utterly baseless, particularly considering Canada's small involvement in drug trafficking in the United States. And it didn't stop there. Goods that are redirected through foreign nations now incur a 40% penalty, plugging the gap. In the past, Canadian exporters had avoided paying customs. Combine this with the already excruciating Section 232 tariffs, which are 25% on vehicles and parts and 50% on steel and aluminum. Additionally, Canada's fundamental sectors are vulnerable, lacking protection from USMCA exemptions. The effects are reciprocal. Costs have increased for American manufacturers who depend on Canadian metals and parts, which has led to higher prices for appliances, homes, and automobiles. Analysts caution the U.S. families may have to pay an additional $2,400 annually as a result of tariffs that are ostensibly intended to penalize Canada. The actions are infuriating Canadians and hurting American consumers in typical boomerang way. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons before we move on to Canada's response. It enables us to connect with more auto enthusiasts like you. Let's go on to the following development: Canada's audacious departure from American reliance. Canada is changing course and rewriting its trade strategy. Canada is changing course and rewriting its trade strategy. With almost 80% of its exports going to the United States, Canada's economy has been tilting south for more than a century. However, 2025 is requiring a drastic change. Canada is being forced to diversify, open up new trade routes, and change its economic character as a result of tariffs and political unrest. Between May 2024 and May 2025, shipments heading to the United States decreased from 78% to 68%, the lowest outside of epidemic years in decades. The United Kingdom saw a 473% increase in gold exports. Aluminum shipments to Italy increased, while energy supplies to Singapore rose. These are fresh lifelines, not band-aid solutions. Due in great part to sales of gold and minerals, Canada's merchandise trade imbalance even decreased from $7.6 billion to $5.9 billion in only 1 month. However, analysts warn that this could only be a temporary boost because a lot of businesses hurried shipments before the tariff deadline. The United States remains Canada's most practicable market due to geography and linked supply networks. However, Ottawa makes it quite evident that relying too much on a single client can be harmful. A more diverse country has fewer abandonments, compared to insurance in a time when commerce is weaponized. However, diversifying overseas is only half the fight. A strong movement is gaining traction at home. Traveling local, boosting local pride, developing resilience, and purchasing Canadian. Pride. Invest in Canadian products and cultivate resilience. Canada is supporting a domestic counter-movement as trade tensions increase because its efforts have moved from slogans to everyday life. 67% of Canadians steer clear of the U.S. products. This consumer push is changing demand and providing domestic producers new impetus despite rising costs. Prior to the conflict, companies are rushing to obtain U.S. access through USMCA compliance. Just 50% of shipments complied with its intricate origin regulations. Compliance reached 2/3 by the middle of 2025, and by the end of the year, it is expected to reach 90%. Important markets remain open despite the expense of costly audits and supply chain modifications. Internal obstacles are another issue that policymakers are addressing. Research indicates that interprovincial trade should be dismantled. Walls may boost GDP by $200 billion a year, providing a more robust local buffer for industries that are impacted by tariffs. Canada's strength is still energy. Demand in the U.S. is still robust, but Ottawa is controlling oil and gas shipments to Asia and Europe to lessen American influence. Additionally, politics is influencing the final path forward while consumers mobilize domestically. Politics in the fast lane, opposition, and future prospects. Politics in the fast lane, opposition, and future prospects. In this trade war, politics has emerged as the pivotal arena. Prime Minister Mark Carney has become more adamant when a new deadline for a U.S. trade accord passed without any progress on July 20th, 25. His point is really apparent. Canada will prioritize resilience and diversity above sovereignty in exchange for tariff relief. Public opinion reflects that decision. 91% of Canadians support lowering the U.S. dependence, while 2/3 now have a negative opinion of America, with 67% boycotting American products and 65% promising to avoid visit to the country. This goes beyond fleeting annoyance. It signifies a more profound change in identity away from automatic Washingtonian allegiance. Washington's strategy is purposeful unpredictability south of the border. Analysts refer to the 35% tariffs and their shifting reasons from fentanyl to dairy as a floating rationale strategy that aims to keep Canada permanently off balance. The USMCA Sunset Review threatens to collapse in 2026, making it the real stress test. Yet amid uncertainty, Canada is rallying, diversifying exports, imposing retaliatory tariffs, and boosting unity. A tougher, more strategic coexistence is replacing the age of uncritical partnership. This leads us to the overall picture, the arduous path to resilience in Canada. Conclusion. From tariff chaos to more difficult self-sufficiency. Conclusion. From tariff chaos to more difficult self-sufficiency. Canada has had a difficult time navigating the tariff crisis in 2025. Exports were redirected, tourism stagnated, and household expenses increased on both sides of the border. However, resilience emerges from the grind. Diversification is a trend among Canadian businesses. Consumers are driving a strong Canadian drive, and USMCA compliance is increasing. Lawmakers are even tearing down long-standing internal obstacles, transforming catastrophe into change. Political volatility is still a risk, and the U.S. market continues to cast a long shadow. However, the message is clear. America's slipstream is no longer being traversed by Canada. It is charting its own path to financial autonomy. It's your turn now. Will American goods eventually be supplanted by the Buy Canadian movement? When rising prices become a reality, how will American consumers respond? What do you believe will ultimately cause Washington to recognize that tariffs are having the opposite effect? Leave a comment below with your opinions. And for today, we'll downshift there. Remember to subscribe to Piston Pundit if you like this analysis. A one-stop shop for industry insights and vehicle updates. I appreciate you viewing, and I hope to see you again soon. Any of the videos on the screen are now available for viewing. There's a lot more to discover.